It's time to discuss Streamlabs OBS. Now, when a lot of people get into streaming, they start by using Streamlabs OBS. It's another software that you can stream from. Despite its name, Streamlabs OBS and OBS Studio are not related, and this is something that the companies want to make very, very clear. Even though they both have the term OBS in their name, they are not related, they are not the same company. OBS simply means Open Broadcaster Software, as you can see here at the top left-hand corner of the OBS Studio homepage. Now, the logo for OBS is this little, I guess it's like a ninja star, but if we go to the Streamlabs website, you'll see it's completely different in branding and color. Streamlabs OBS is in fact changing its name. If you take a look at the top of the page, it says Streamlabs OBS is now Streamlabs Desktop. This is due to many factors, but one of them being that, they don't want to be confused with OBS Studio. Now the question is, why do we and most streamers choose OBS Studio over Streamlabs OBS, and what are the differences between the two softwares? Well, they're both free. They're both free to download from the internet, but there are some huge differences. So let's put them side by side and find out exactly what the difference is between OBS and Streamlabs OBS. Now, what you can see on stream right now is on the left hand of the screen. This is Streamlabs Desktop. This is Streamlabs OBS. And on the right hand side of the screen is OBS Studio, as we know and love. It's a little bit confusing because you'll be able to see me multiple times because this is what I'm using to record the screen right now. I'm actually using Streamlabs Desktop to record me using OBS Studio. If I use two instances of OBS Studio, it can cause lag and glitching. So I use Streamlabs to record my OBS Studio. What are the main differences? OBS Studio is an open broadcast software and it's open source. And what open source means is that anybody can develop coding and features for OBS Studio and install it to the program and to the software for use. So when we talk about these encoded softwares, we're talking about plugins, community-based plugins that help you experience new features and unique new displays on your stream. Anybody can develop these and install them for use on OBS Studio. Streamlabs OBS or Streamlabs Desktop is not open source. If you want new features and you want unique new updates, Streamlabs have to do that and install it themselves. It is not available for plugins, and you cannot encode your own features to install yourself on Streamlabs OBS. So it's a little bit more restricted. Let's talk about the pros of Streamlabs OBS. I think from the off you can see that Streamlabs OBS actually does look a little bit nicer. It's a little bit of a nicer color scheme. The user interface itself has got these nice funky logos, and it just looks a little bit more friendly to the eye. This is one of the biggest pros of Streamlabs OBS. It is definitely more user friendly. Does that mean that it's better to use? No, but it's definitely more user-friendly. We've got all these icons on the left-hand side of the screen. We've got our preview area, our overlays library, some new highlighter features for streams. Down here, you've got the settings, all of these menus in the same place. And I think it just generally looks a bit better. You've got your sources and scenes and mixes here at the bottom, same as you do in OBS Studio, but they just look a little bit larger and easier on the eye. But other than that, they look fairly similar. Now, if you want to change your overlays on Streamlabs OBS, you have to go to your layout editor. And then you drag around these specific widgets and features, and you drag them around, and it will change what they look like in your main preview. However, on OBS Studio, you can literally just drag and drop these features. You see what I'm doing with the audio mixer in OBS Studio? You can just drag and drop them. So actually on that front, moving your widgets and your menus around is a lot easier on OBS Studio. What other things are different on Streamlabs OBS? I think when we're talking about pros on Streamlabs Desktop OBS, there are a few things that it does very well. There's a lot that it doesn't do very well. The one thing it does do extremely well is its widgets. It has an inbuilt widget system. So if I go to the sources and I go plus, you can see up here, if I go to widgets, we've got an entire list. We should have an entire list of widgets. It's not updating. It's not populating right now, but I can add my donation goals. I can add my alert boxes. You see up here, I've got alert box and I've got stream labels. All of these widgets that we have to use a browser source for in OBS Studio are inbuilt in Streamlabs OBS. You do not have to create a browser source. You just simply click on these here and you can add it internally. No browser source is needed. So that is a very good feature of Streamlabs OBS. However, is it really that much of a hassle to add a browser source and go and get the URL? I don't think this is a feature that makes it above and beyond OBS Studio. Now, like I said, with OBS Studio, we can add our own plugins. If I go to my sources down here, you can see that I've added waveform, spectralizer, I've added VFX, I've added my advanced scene switchers, I've added loads of different plugins to make this exactly what I want it to be. Streamlabs, we can't do that. Any specific new features that you want added to the software, we have to wait for Streamlabs to be able to update the software and make it available for everyone. You can't personalize it just with features that you want, which is a huge no-no for larger and more successful streamers, and is exactly why they use OBS Studio rather than Streamlabs OBS. Now, if this changed in the future, it would be a game changer. However, at the moment, you can only use plugins with OBS Studio. One of the other huge cons of using Streamlabs OBS is that it absolutely munches your CPU usage. And I'm talking 20 or 30% more CPU usage than if you're using OBS Studio. Now, for those of you who don't know what CPU usage is, it's basically the amount of your computer that the processors are using. If you're using 100% of your CPU, your computer is maximizing its capabilities. It cannot go any higher, and things will start to freeze, frames will drop and glitch. If your CPU is only using 10%, it's got so much more capability, it's got so much more room to apply other resources and things like that. So you want to be using as little CPU as possible. Just having Streamlabs open and recording is using 20% of my CPU. For comparison, if I record on OBS Studio, it uses 6% of my CPU. When I stream, Streamlabs OBS uses 40% of my CPU. But if I stream on OBS Studio, it uses 15%. So OBS Studio is way better at being efficient with your computer's hardware and resources. Another huge reason why people use OBS Studio over Streamlabs OBS. Trying to think, are there any other pros for Streamlabs OBS? Everything is integrated on Streamlabs OBS. Like I said, with the widgets, you don't have to go and get the browser source. Stream labels, all of that text information is integrated on Streamlabs OBS. Let's have a look at the settings menus for both. So you can see it's extremely, extremely similar. For those wondering, by the way, OBS Studio came first, and it's not a coincidence that everything looks very similar. Enough said. You got your general menus here, and in fact, a lot of the settings are basically exactly the same. Output menus, again, the settings are very, very similar. Output modes, you've got simple and advanced. If you look up here on OBS Studio, you can change all the same settings. So a lot of the stuff that I am showing you in our tutorials for OBS Studio also applies to Streamlabs. Very, very similar. You can see, like, even the menus here are identical. Hotkeys. Okay, what you do have in Streamlabs OBS is a few more appearance options. You can change the theme of the application to make it look darker or lighter. You can change when you get notifications about Streamlabs. You've got remote control, virtual webcams. This might seem like a game changer. You've got way more stuff that you can change in Streamlabs OBS settings. But realistically, these are all things that you can add to OBS Studio with the right plugin. And, let's just say, If you don't want them, you don't have them on OBS Studio, so it reduces the amount of CPU usage. If you do want them, you can install them, and you have the choice to do so. But on Streamlabs OBS, you do not have the choice to remove and add these features, which I think just speaks volumes for for favoring OBS Studio over Streamlabs OBS. Everything looks extremely similar. Everything works basically exactly the same, apart from plugins. What you do have here on Streamlabs OBS is the ability to go and look at an alert library or an overlay library. Streamlabs OBS, or Streamlabs Desktop, as I should be calling it, has a Prime service. It's a monthly service. I think at the moment it's $19.99 a month. And with it, you can add widgets, you can add overlay styles, and you can install them from inside the Streamlabs OBS app. This is extremely, extremely powerful. It's a great feature. In my opinion, a little bit overpriced, because you can either make those overlays yourself, or you can even buy overlay files and PNGs on the internet for like $10. But it is a really, really efficient, really easy feature, especially if you're somebody who doesn't want to create your own or spend a ton of money, because what you can do with a month's membership, you can actually download as many of these as you want and apply them to your stream. Then once your membership's over, you have those overlays forever. They never go away. So it is a pretty good feature. Statistics. You now have goals and statistics on Streamlabs. These are all gimmicks. These are all things that you can find on OBS Studio with the correct plugin, except Streamlabs has them inbuilt and automatically uses up a ton of your CPU. So, in conclusion, OBS Studio and Streamlabs OBS are incredibly similar. They are not the same companies. They are different companies. The pros of using OBS Studio. The biggest pro: you can install plugins. You can control the features that you want and don't want in OBS Studio and add and remove them as and when you wish. Another huge pro to OBS Studio is the amount of your software, of your CPU that it uses. It saves on CPU exponentially when compared to Streamlabs OBS. Streamlabs OBS desktop users experience far more crashes and glitches and frame drops than those who use OBS Studio. That's just a fact. Other pros for OBS Studio over Streamlabs OBS. It came first. It was the original developer of this open broadcast software, and in my opinion, they do it the best. It's far more customizable in the menus here without having to go into separate settings menus and drag everything. It's just way easier to control. But let's think about the pros of Streamlabs OBS. You get those overlay menus, the alert menus. You get, it just looks a lot easier on the eye. That is quite a nice, I do wish OBS Studio would update their interface a little bit, because it doesn't look that great. Streamlabs OBS does look decent. You get those libraries like we talked about for the alert boxes and the widgets. The widgets are inbuilt. They are pre-installed into Streamlabs OBS. So you don't have to add a browser source for alert boxes, donation goals, events lists. That is all already in the sources menus. So you don't have to go and install external software or add browser sources. And Streamlabs Desktop have better marketing because they are focused on the business side of things. And this is the final thing that I'll say on Streamlabs OBS, is that it is very much a for-profit business. They charge for Prime. They also charge for other services as well. They do like payouts. They do like donation pages, and you can design your own Streamlabs donation page website. And they're very much for profit, which is not a bad thing. I have nothing against that. You know, it's a business. That's how they make money. But OBS Studio was designed by streamers for streamers, and is as far as I'm aware, not for profit. I could be wrong on that, but as far as I'm aware, they're not for profit. There is no like subscription service or anything like that. And you can do everything that Streamlabs does inside OBS with the right knowledge, with this tutorial, with this course. And so for now, as of 2022, I would be using OBS Studio over Streamlabs OBS every single day of the week.